Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Health is Wealth. I am your host, Shabnam Riaz. Today's topic, today's issue that we're going to talk about is pulmonary diseases or issues of the lungs, something that is very, very important. It seems that maybe we might not take these issues so seriously. So that's why we're discussing this issue today. And for today's topic, we're very happy to have with us in the studios Dr. Sajjad Nasir, pulmonologist, Principal Medical Officer for the Park Atomic Energy Commission Hospital. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Shabnam. It's nice to be here.
You're welcome. And seated next to Dr. Sajjad, we have Dr. Uzma Masroor, Consultant Clinical Psychologist. As always, a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Uzma.
Same here. Thank you.
Okay, so before we discuss these issues, we're going to show you a short report. Okay, welcome back. Now, a very, very important topic, as we said today. And we hope that you're going to go away with lots of information for how important, it is to focus on the lungs. Now, Dr. Sajjad, tell us, do people really understand the importance of caring for their lungs and how, the value of looking after your pulmonary health?
Well, I think, Shabnam, lungs, as we all know, they are very important organs. And the principal function of lungs is to bring the fresh oxygen to our body. And we know that oxygen is required for the viability or the life of all the organs, including heart, brain, kidneys, guts, liver, each and every organ of the body. At the same time, they have a function to get rid of the toxic gas known as carbon dioxide. So they play a very key role in our body. Unfortunately, the general public don't have that realization of the pulmonary conditions at times. And I personally feel that it is a multitude of different factors. Firstly, I think probably it's the lack of facilities, lack of services, which are very, very important to have a realization by the people that how important it is to look after their lungs. Secondly, I think nature has given lungs a huge capacity. If you put each and every unit of a lung on a ground, it would fill the whole tennis court. So by the time people realize that their lungs are in a bad shape, it might be too late for them. And then with the lack of patchy facilities, it can be difficult to access the health services. And I think lastly, there's a lot of social myths and taboos. We all want to be and to show ourselves as a strong character. We don't show that we are breathless or we are coughing or we're having any other chest symptoms, and that's why they are hesitating to contact the doctors. And at times, I think because most of the pulmonary conditions, as we used to say, I don't think it stands true nowadays, it's poor man's diseases. And that's why the focus, and it's the focus on the pulmonary condition is not as much as some other conditions like heart conditions or diabetes, which are probably more common in people with a social background of a richer background. So I think these are a few reasons where the people, I personally feel that they don't the pulmonary conditions are not being highlighted, and they don't take them that much seriously as it should be.
Okay, now having said that, what are the symptoms that should raise alarms, and when should a person go to, see a pulmonologist?
I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the lungs, they carry a very important function of bringing the oxygen to our body. And hence, the first symptom, which if people having a lung condition would come across, would be feeling more breathless than normal selves. So say if they used to walk 10 meters and they can't walk the 10 meters or 20 meters, which they used to do, it means something is probably going wrong with their lungs. The other symptoms are coughing. If they're coughing more than what they should do, if they're bringing a lot of sputum, a lot of secretions, a lot of phlegm coming from their chest, is something which is not normal for them. And say at times blood coming in the sputum. Chest pain, besides heart, it can be due to the lung conditions.
That's a very important
It's a very important symptom to keep an eye on. And then the other general symptoms are fever, being symptoms of lethargy, weight loss, lack of appetite, lack of thriving in the kids, With low oxygen, you can lose your concentration, focus, you can have memory loss as a result, and all sort of systemic symptoms can be secondary to lung conditions.
That is a lot of conditions that are sort of, you know, because of that. Okay, Dr. Usma, tell us about, you know, why is there this sort of lack of assertiveness in going to see a doctor? Why do we wait for things to get so bad that we're either in incredible pain or there's a fever that's going on for ages and ages, and then we go and seek a doctor's help?
Actually, there is a prevailing attitude in our society. We usually wait for some disaster to come or something like that. Definitely, there are certain reasons due to which they are hesitant to go to a doctor. I think first thing is, again, Dr. Saab already mentioned, lack of facilities, lack of awareness. Maybe access to doctor is very difficult because they do not know where to go. Sometimes they are not referred properly. And sometimes at initial stages, they are sometimes self-medicated and they have certain, I would say, desi mode of treatments they try to use, or they try to follow the suggestions from others, from other family members, some other, significant other. They get some suggestions and try to follow them. Since it is not very obvious initially and they can go with that, they might designate different reasons to that, unrest condition that is related to pulmonary diseases. So once it is just beyond their control, then they see a doctor, and usually it is late. So I think awareness would bring great change. People should be, like, I have seen many programs which are run for the awareness of public. I think it should be one of those, very important one, because I've seen in my own experience that people do not usually, pay attention to such things. Like if something is related to breathing or some initial signs, as Dr. Saab just mentioned, they simply ignore them. They might say it is some kind of allergy and I'm trying this and that. So this hesitation comes from, learning from other people's experiences. That may not be true in their condition, or there must have been something else for somebody else's condition, so they try to believe on them. I think this attitude needs to be changed. With respect to other diseases, they have a lot of knowledge about heart disease. They are worried about that. Once they get some kind of panic, attack, they simply think as if it is heart disease and they go for examination and something like that. But in case of this specific disease, they are usually ignorant just because of lack of knowledge, what I think of. And we have this attitude in our society that is procrastination, delaying, waiting for something really
And it also seems that people will take a heart issue more seriously.
Exactly.
And if they have sort of a chest pain or whatever, or palpitations or something like that, they'll rush to a doctor. But when it's something to do with breathing, it seems that they're less concerned.
Exactly. I think misdiagnosis again is another factor. Sometimes they are not referred properly, I would say again. And secondly, self-fulfilling, they try to manage somehow the other and wait for some catastrophic reaction of body that they should rush to the doctor. I think this attitude needs to be changed.
And I think the heart conditions, they have their implications very short and snap. People, they sort of die from it instantaneously, and that's why people are more aware and they're more scared and they want to take the opinion ASAP. However, I think in lung conditions, the things that sort of linger on and linger on and linger on, and then as of our attitude is that we'll see, dekhi jayegi, and we try different things at home and different medications advised by different people. And as Dr. Saab said, that by the time they come to us, it can be too late.
Absolutely true, which is a tragedy in itself.
And this becomes another story.
Of course, because for a medical professional to see something that could have easily been prevented, and for it to come to, of course, it must make a person feel so bad in that way. Okay, something I wanted to talk about. When you talk about lung issues and lung disease, you immediately think of smoking. Now, how many people are aware of the dangers? Well, of course they know the dangers of smoking, but of passive smoking. Can you please sort out the myths from the facts for us?
I think, Shabdam, you raised a very valid and very important point here, and I'm glad that we're discussing on this forum here. One cigarette contains more than 4,000 different chemicals. More than 4,000.
4,000 different
More than 4,000 different chemicals.
We're talking about one cigarette.
Just one cigarette.
My God.
Okay, and most of these chemicals, a few of them like ammonia, sulfur, they are what we call them carcinogenic. They can cause cancers.
Cancer causing.
They can cause cancer. And then things like carbon and soot, they can dry the breathing tubes and make them stiff. And then as a result, people get symptoms like feeling breathless and get a condition known as COPD or emphysema or bronchitis. So that's one spectrum, but on the severe spectrum, people can get cancers. And cancers can be of lungs, they can be of tongue, they can be of the food pipe, they can be of the brain. So, you know, it's...
Of the brain as well because of
the
smoking.
brain, because of the chemicals released from the cigarette. Now, coming to your point of the passive smoking, you know, one has to appreciate that the damage of the smoking is not due to ingestion, it's due to inhalation. That is what you are breathing in. So if somebody is sitting in a close quarters in the same room and sharing the same room, they are actually exposed to the same atmosphere as to a person who is smoking. So they are getting the same chemicals going through their nose and mouth to their breathing tubes.
So even though it's the other person who's directly inhaling a cigarette, the person sitting next to them is getting equal...
They would get the same damage because it's the same chemicals which are going into the environment. It's similar to, you know, if something goes wrong somewhere, like any, say, nuclear disaster or any gas or any fumes being happening somewhere, then all the people in that vicinity which are exposed and who are inhaling, they would get the damage. So we are seeing people like, you know, the husband is smoking for 40 years, but the wife is coming in with the chest conditions. But more importantly, which I think I would like to raise on this forum, is the kids, the children. It's not their fault. And the parents, if they're smoking in their presence, which is not a good thing to do anyway, but they are being exposed to the same damage without their consent or what they, you know, they would like to do. And then their damage is more significant and severe because their breathing tubes are more fragile. And then with their lifespan, they would get symptoms maybe at the age of 30 or 40 years as compared to somebody who starts to smoke at 20 or 30 years and getting symptoms 20, 30 years down the line. So they would suffer in the very initial phase of their life. So I think I would like to give a message to the public, that especially the parents, that passive smoking is as bad. And the kids, especially, it's not their fault. They shouldn't be exposed to it.
And in fact, if you think that the lengths that parents go to in providing their children with food on the table, good education and good healthcare, and then, you know, unknowingly subjecting them to such harmful environment because, again, because of the awareness. Dr. Usman, how can we enforce this awareness? Now, in our culture, you know, you sometimes have guests over who are at your house, and without asking you, they start smoking. So then you have the cultural thing that, you know, oh, if I say something, a guest is going to be offended. How do you sensitize a society towards this?
Definitely, it is slightly difficult in our society because we have to, you know, maintain this relationship, sustain it as well. So sometimes it is very difficult to mention in front of public, but what we can do, like we can take some measures which are not obvious or which is not observable to others. For example, if we know somebody is smoking, we can prevent our children from coming to that room or something like that. I would not say it is okay if once or twice it happens, but sometimes unintentionally things are happening to us. For example, there are certain changes in our environment which are causing damage to our, you know, overall health, but we cannot do anything about that.
So but this is something that we can do.
Exactly. We cannot do anything. So to me, as a psychologist, I would say in our society, there are many things which are very difficult to implement, even though we think they are right. However, we can do a lot of things. Again, we can bring some awareness to our, you know, if somebody who is visiting us or in a social setup, we can educate people because this is our moral duty as well to educate people if something is not good for themselves as well. So we can educate people, or we can create certain, you know, circumstances where we cannot bring our children, or we can, we are ourselves are not exposed to. So this is, we have to take some action on it because, you know, people are very well aware of this thing. If they are smoking, they are definitely damaging their environment and people around. But simply we can provide them awareness, or at least give them some clue so that they do not repeat
And I
it.
suppose it's the first step when you actually are saying to somebody that, you know, I'm not really comfortable with you doing this in my house because it's
Here I have a point. Sorry.
you know,
Ji.
then that will also get a message across.
That's true.
But I think there should always be a proper way of communication. We should communicate in a proper way so that we can, you know, make them realize that this is dangerous for themselves as well. Not for ourselves, for others, but this is dangerous for themselves as well. So this is what we can, you know, do. We can use proper means of communication to bring some change, because this is again our duty.
Right.
We need to do whatever we can.
I think it's a difficult catch-22 situation. The problem is, I mean, working in UK for 15...
Okay, we'll come back to this. We're going for a break right now. Please don't change the channel. Welcome back to the programme. Now, before we went for the break, Dr. Sajjad, we were talking about passive smoking and the implications on another person's health. Now, what about pregnancy? Number one, the mother, expectant mother, smoking, and number two, the most important thing that I would think for our society is her being subjected to passive smokers in the house.
I think again, Sharma, it's a very valid and very good question which you have raised. Pregnancy by itself puts a lot of stress on mother's body. We all know that. And to provide a good, clean blood to the mother's body and as well as to the kid, you need to ensure that they are both in healthy and good condition. So if somebody is smoking, as I've said, one cigarette has 4,000 different chemicals. And if they're going to the bloodstream, first of all, they would affect the mother's health. And because of all that burden going on the mother's body anyway, if you're putting an extra burden, it's going to compromise her health to begin with. And that would indirectly affect the kid or the child or the fetus in her womb. And directly, the same chemicals which go into her bloodstream can go through the placenta or the cord which connects the mother and the fetus, can affect the fetus growth as well. So it is quite evidence-based, and research has shown that the mothers who smoke actively or passively can compromise mother's health to begin with, but at the same time would affect the fetus growth and can affect the fetus well-being and the organ development as well at the same time. And that's why I think it's, again, very, very important that, passive smoking should be discouraged, especially by the other family members in presence of the mothers who are expecting. And if we go, we are trying to follow Western most of the instances, which is right to a certain extent. But, working and living in UK for 15 years, the government has put a ban on the smoking in the public places. You cannot simply smoke in a public place at all, full stop. And I think, as Dr. Sahib mentioned before a break, that there are social taboos and restrictions, but I think one has to step up and say politely to the family member that, if they want to smoke, they're more than welcome to smoke, but they can go to, say, other room or outside the house and smoke and come back.
How effective is it if they smoke in another room? Should it be in another side of the house?
Yeah, I think still, but still sitting in the same close quarters is something different. But, if you're going to, say, outside where it's a good ventilation going on, so the air circulates. So you're not getting the same toxins. And if they're going to other room with a good ventilation, then the toxins would go away. But if they're staying in the same room, if there's no ventilation, you are going to be exposed for the same duration of time till that person and the smoke is there.
Right.
So that might, depending on the ventilation, might last for, say, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours.
Okay.
It depends how long the ventilation circulates that air.
How harmful it can be. Okay, so that's really, really important advice that Dr. Sajjad is giving. Many times a person doesn't realise, but a woman who is pregnant must not be in the same place where somebody is smoking. That's really, really important, as Dr. Sajjad has said. Now, the weather's changing, it's getting colder. So, you know, we see many people who are living in sort of closed living quarters, that they bring their sort of their cooking stove inside the room, and you'll have quite a few people inside, and they're also cooking inside as well. What is that doing to their lungs?
Well, I think, again, we don't have that fire and safety regulations which are there in the West or civilized societies. I mean, ideally that shouldn't happen. And as you might be, you know, aware, every year we are hearing unfortunate stories about the carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yes.
The family waking up in the morning, and unfortunately all of them, including kids, they are dying because of it, because of the accumulation of carbon monoxide. And it's a slow poison, so they don't realize their whole body gets paralyzed and they're not able to walk or you know, wake up and try to get some help. And then, you know, fire incidents is happening because of the unhealthy and unsafe sort of connections between the stoves and the pipes. So besides the toxins, I think it's a major fire and safety hazard. It's a major fire and safety hazard. And besides the long-term implications, every year we are hearing about the fire stories, we are hearing about the all the family being wiped out in the night and the burns and all those things. So I think besides the toxins part of it, I'm also very much concerned about the direct implications of the lack of safety regulations which these stoves are being operated on.
Absolutely true. Dr. Uzma, we have, you know, as we just said, you know, when we're talking about our nation in general, Dr. Sajjad, you know, mentioned before we were coming in to record the program, that our usual sentence of "dekhi jayegi, khair hai," you know, that sort of an attitude. But is the media doing enough? I mean, how do you get your society to realize that, you know, this is important? And then when you talk about preventive measures, you find people sort of mocking you or laughing at you and saying, you know, don't be so worried about everything.
Yeah, we are simply delaying it just to avoid any unpleasant thing. In fact, we do not want to go through regular and rigorous examination and then taking medication. And we also are lacking knowledge of taking medication because we think it is some kind of dependency we are gaining over it, or sometimes we think that they might have some negative side effects. We will not be able to, you know, be active as we used to be before. Taking, you know, looking at the positive side of the medication and everything, we are looking at the, you know, dark side of it. And this is again all because of knowledge, and we can introduce certain programs, we can facilitate people because there are certain, you know, informative programs, workshops, trainings which are accessible to those who are educated, and we target that
so
population.
Can pass on
usually,
that information as well.
But usually we do not, I would say, cater to that population that has difficulty, you know, accessing to such facilities.
True. That's very
Sometimes
true.
we have very high, you know, fee structure for that and everything. So we can bring that information to the lower, you know, population.
We can use radio.
Yeah, we can.
Print media.
There are a lot of like we can prepare, you know, small ads, and we can, you know, flash them again and again on TV, and then they get to know about that.
In fact, in prime time, we can have, you know, aggressive media campaigns. That
it has to.
I think it has to be each and every corner of the society to come forward and play its part. I mean, to begin with, it should be us, the doctors. It's not only about writing the medications; it's the education at the same time. One has to spend, you know, a few minutes to educate them about smoking, or you know, smoking effects, active and passive, on the kids, on the pregnancy, and all those things, and about the different treatments we are giving. But then the media, and I think nowadays the things, you know, have really changed in the last 10 years. You don't need to spend too much to advertise. Just put a small ad showing the effects of smoking, how they affect the lungs, how they affect the body on a Facebook, and within next 30 seconds you'll get 20 million likes.
True.
Yeah,
And everybody has access to the Facebook and all those things, so you don't need to spend too much.
In fact, they're picking more information from social media.
I have one more suggestion. Like, people usually do not, you know, pay attention to sometimes advice of other people with respect to the dangerous effects of, you know, disease if it is diagnosed. I think a consultant can play a role, a key role. Like, every consultant definitely has the basic knowledge of possible diseases which might be diagnosed later on. So I think providing clear information, providing with the details, in an empathetic manner can also help. Because you can remove their fear, not because they should read the books or they should listen to some XYZ people. I think consultants, the doctors where they are referred to initially, practitioners, the physicians, they should provide knowledge regarding that there is a possibility of this disease, and you definitely need to go to the doctor or a specialist, and they might refer to someone they know. I think this would also decrease the risk.
You have to start from where the kids spend 7 to 8 hours of their day.
And they're very influenced by their teachers.
And they are influenced by the teachers. I mean, in UK, my kids, the crisps, the fizzy drinks, and all non-healthy stuff was completely banned. And we all know that all these things, they've got the artificial flavors and artificial ingredients which can damage our health. And I think the kids that take that message very strongly, so that when they come back home, they don't ask you to bring all these things which can damage your health.
Very good.
True.
Similarly, on the school side, they should teach from the very beginning what's the effect of smoking, what's the effect of clean environment or the bad environment, or say smoke, nowadays, which we are coming across, what's the effect and what role we can play to reduce the effect on the environment. And I think that thing starts from the school, from the house, and that would probably come to the community and the society in general. If you're trying to change your habits at the age of 30, 40 years or 50 years, I think it's going to be very, very challenging.
That's absolutely true. And start earlier rather than...
Even at this stage of when they start their, professional career, it is again very difficult. We think it is very initial stage, but in fact it is late. When they are in their early 20s or the mid 20s, it is already very late.
Many habits have sort of taken their hold there. Okay, and something else that we have to talk about today is the smog issue that we've been having. Especially in Lahore, and the health implications. Exactly who is at risk? Is it the same for everybody? And what are the preventive measures?
I think, Shabnam, the smoke is a problem which is not only in Lahore, it's across Delhi, Mumbai, China. So if you look on the sort of geopolitical areas which are affected, there are few things in common between them. Smoke is a combination of two words. One is smoke and then fog. They're two different things. Now, fog is a process which can happen in any part of the world where there's a temperature inversion. So again, it's not a healthy thing. It's a bad ozone which sits down in the atmosphere.
So fog can give you issues as well?
It can do. It can do. What we call the bad ozone can still damage our lungs. But when that fog, which is basically because of the temperature inversion, the ozone stays down in the breathing atmosphere, mixes with the smoke. And the smoke comes from industries. It comes from cars, especially the diesel cars. It comes from, especially if you talk in the context of subcontinent, from the farmers burning the biofuels after the end of the harvesting season. That gives rise to very nasty smoke. And the problem is, because of the temperature inversion, there's no circulation of the air. So everything remains and makes a cloud. And that's similar to a greenhouse sort of, in effect, in a negative way, because you're breathing in that in that shell where you're breathing in and out, and everything accumulates in that environment. Now, coming to the second part of your question, it can affect anyone and everyone, because still you are going to breathe through that atmosphere. But the people who are mostly affected are kids, again, pregnant people, and people who are having lung conditions or breathing problems, and also the elderly. And I think in terms of prevention, we have to cut down the smoke.
Right.
And then you have to reduce the exposure to the smoke. So you have to sort of stay more indoors, and you have to sort of close the windows and the vent systems and put the mask on to reduce the exposure.
Right, okay. It seems that we touched on this topic towards the end of the program. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We will take it up again in another program, because this is a topic that's very, very important to many, many people. Thank you so much, Dr. Sajjad, Dr. Uzma, for being with us here today on the program. And thank you so much for such valuable advice for everyone.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting.
Likewise. Okay, so we come to the end of today's program. Hopefully you have also learned the, the implications of how important it is to have healthy lungs, as well as so many other things going on with us. So stay happy, stay healthy. See you again next week. Bye-bye.